Characters. Who are they? What are they? Who will they become? So much goes into the creation of a character, their backstory, culture, beliefs, image, eye color, description, personalities, and so much more. As readers, we only get a glimpse of what truly goes into each character. So grab a beverage and get comfortable as we explore this episode's character in depth with your host, Madilynn Dale. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Character Driven. I am super excited for this author I have for you guys today. I'm apparently his arch nemesis from us being on Indie Mayhem, the game show hosted by Ron Lahr and RJ Bruchette. But I'm excited to talk about his character and the book it's from because, I recently finished this book and the series is already starting out to be amazing. Not only does it remind me of home, but the characters are hilarious. But enough about me. Let me bring in Mr. Bob McGough.
Hello, hello. And yes, I'm sorry to announce that you're no longer my sole nemesis. You're now co-nemesis because I have been defeated yet again on Indie Mayhem. And that is how I establish who all my nemesis are. So I don't want, in case someone hasn't watched it, I'm not going to spoil it, but just know it was not me. So
So go ahead and tell our viewers a little bit about you and introduce our fabulous character.
Sure thing. I am, as already stated, Bob McGough. I am a author from South Central Alabama, and I write urban fantasy about a redneck wizard named Howard Marsh who lives in South Central Alabama, much like myself. The main difference being that he's a wizard and he's addicted to meth, and I have no magical powers, and I'm way too fat to be on meth. So there are some subtle differences.
Yes. And so okay. There's so many things I can say about Marsh. It's hilarious. But let's start out with go ahead and tell our viewers kind of what his world is like, where he lives.
Yeah. So he lives in Jubal County, which is very much inspired by the county that I grew up in, Crenshaw County. But he lives in a storage shed because he's homeless. He decided that drugs were more important than rent along the way and wound up living in a storage shed. Jubal County itself is stunningly gorgeous in the terrain. South Alabama, for all its endless flaws, is very gorgeous countryside, but it's also coupled with, intense poverty. There are areas of Alabama that are literally the third world. And so it is, it's kind of that dichotomy of ugly houses, pretty terrain, and a lot of dirt roads.
Sounds about right for a rural area because, like I mentioned earlier, it reminds me a lot of my hometown, which is probably crazy scary, but very rural Southeast Oklahoma. Back in the day, it was before marijuana was legal. It was don't go hiking in the woods in somebody's land that you don't know because you might come across something then not make it back out. So. Yeah. Scary world, but also kind of sad,
Yeah.
But it's really neat how he makes that work for him in the storage shed.
Yeah, it's somewhat loosely inspired by some friends and I used to rent a storage shed as a hangout spot, and we had a guy that basically lived there on the couch. He had a home. He just liked being there more. So he just hung out there all the time. And so that was kind of the inspiration. And it worked. It worked for him.
Wow.
So Marsh makes it work for him as well.
Yes, him and his recliner chair. So let's talk about his
Yeah.
family, because that's something you kind of allude to in the first book, like the craziness of his family. Like what's going on there?
So I can safely say that it's not until the kind of the boogeyman in the background is his grandmother, who's
Mhm.
just called Granny. Um, and she does not actually show up on page until book 4, and even then only in an epilogue. She is very much the bad guy in the background, um, and she is the most powerful magic user in Jubal County. Uh, Marsh's family is a magical family. Most of the members have some sort of minor magical ability. For example, his uncle, Hubert Dale, uh, knows whenever someone is expecting him and knows, like, he's like, oh, I feel like someone needs me. And he'll get in the van and go find who needs him. Um,
Mm.
so while most can't actually do magic, um, many of them have minor magical ability. So um, uh, his grandmother is the villain of the series, but where the series is at currently, he is such a he is so bad at magic that it would not even be a contest. So he's kind of got to get his act together before he can really face off against his grandmother.
That is interesting, because I kind of did get that nobody really like wants to face her, especially in that first story of the book,
Yeah,
and it just kind of like sparked my interest, especially as the story progresses and other things come to light. And I'm also
yeah.
curious about his backstory. What led to him discovering drugs?
So he I can't go too in depth into it without giving spoilers, but suffice it to say he had a bad breakup. His high school sweetheart, although he dropped out of high school, his high school sweetheart essentially cheated on him, and he
Mm.
kind of turned to some drugs as a coping mechanism. Um, and then there were some other factors that will be revealed in books. Um, it's something that is subtly alluded to in the series is that Granny has uh, an ability to alter memories. So Marsh himself does actually remember what really triggered him to get as bad as he is, but he what he recalls is his high school girlfriend broke up with him.
Oh. So does it tie
Yep.
anything to the person that's in the woods that I'm going to allude to? Because like I don't want to give that spoiler
Yeah.
away. Oh.
Uh, so it is not directly tied to that. That actually happened when he was a kid. The
Ooh.
figure in the woods is his father, um, who his grandmother murdered. So she's not a nice person. So it's not exactly spelled out in the like word for word, but it's kind of one of those understood, and people just avoid the subject. Um, kind of. So the series is called The Redemption of Howard Marsh because over the course of the series, he will find redemption. You know, he will finally learn how to use his magical abilities properly without using drugs as a coping mechanism. But part of that is his grandmother upset the natural order of the magical world in Jubal County, and
Oh.
so uh, he it's on him kind of he's not consciously thinking that way, but part of the redemption arc is also going to be him redeeming the magic of the county, and kind of healing it. And so that is the subtle thing that is starting as of book 5 comes out March 15th. By book 5, you start to see a little bit more of it. In book 6, which is almost done, it starts to become more and more. And with every book, that will grow as an element.
Ooh. So he's got his hands full with all of that then. Mm.
Yeah. Yep. He's starting to get the pieces together in book 5. He just doesn't realize it. And uh, book 7, when things will really start to kind of pop up in that regard. So I'm looking forward to writing it. So
Yes. Ooh. So do you have a favorite scene that you've created with Marsh?
Yes, I do. For the dumbest reason possible. Anyone who pays me much attention will know that I love puns.
Yes.
And I don't want to give a spoiler. Literally, the climax of book 5 is I got the entire idea for that book by a dumb pun, and I wrote an entire novel that would lead to a really dumb pun. So when that's finally revealed, that's probably my favorite scene. But I'll say my favorite scene that I can talk about without spoilers is he ends up chasing a creature through the woods in book 1 and by woodland creatures. And that's like my favorite scene. And to the point when I sign books, I typically, when I sign it, I put "watch out for squirrels." I don't explain it. I just trust that when they read the book, they'll figure out why I watch out for squirrels.
Yes.
So
yes, I totally that was me, and I was like, oh, the squirrels. So, which it is hilarious. Yep. That scene is hilarious. I do wonder, why did you pick that woodland creature though? Is there anything behind that idea?
A weird backstory. My parents were so my parents divorced when I was young, and my mom remarried a golfer. And so they didn't go to church on Sundays. They went and played golf. And so when I was with them, I went and played golf every Saturday and Sunday for much of my teenage years. And we joked that on the Luverne Country Club, which is exactly as awful as it sounds, there is a squirrel that if you saw it, you were guaranteed to have a bad shot. And we called it the voodoo squirrel. He had a blonde streak going down his back. So you knew when it was him. So yeah. I've noticed my teenage years that squirrels are evil. So there you go.
Nice. I wondered if there was the backstory of that. That is hilarious. So with Marsh and his crazy addiction, what would you say was the biggest growth he experienced in your writing him from book 1 to where you're currently
at? Essentially, he gets a girlfriend who, which is not totally uncommon for him, despite his many flaws. And I can attest to this. When you live in the middle of nowhere, you set the bar much lower than you would if you're anywhere else. So you'll put up with you will date someone a lot more sketch than you would anywhere else. And so, but he finally gets a girlfriend that kind of embraces him for him, just kind of lets him be and doesn't she tells him hey, I'm not down with hard drug use. She's trying to become a nurse. But she doesn't stop him. And she kind of she realizes hey, I wanted to date you. She wanted to date him because he once dated her much older sister. And so it started with kind of oh, let me kind of get back at my sister. But they actually really hit it off. And so she, by not really trying to run his life, because he's so contrary, he realizes he's got a really good thing, and so he starts trying to better just because he wants to keep her. And so that's what kind of starts him down the path of trying to be a slightly better person, and it kind of snowballs from there.
Oh, that is precious. So another fun question.
Yeah.
Which was your favorite creature that you, or well, I guess kind of magical creature that you've brought into this story?
He in the book where he actually gets his girlfriend, he encounters a being known as the King. And the King has been around Jubal County for, as long as Marsh can remember. But he is a satyr. But he's massive and very sickly. Like when you see him, he's got all these open sores and he's very clearly insane. And Marsh has had run-ins with him in the past. And so it's very much a, oh, this guy's dangerous. I need to be careful. And I don't want to go too far into it because it'd be spoilers, but he shows up a couple of times so far. He showed up in 2 different books as this. He was once one of the most powerful magical county and is now kind of, his health is very much tied to the county. So I'm a history minor, and there used to be this concept of the health of the king was tied to the health of the land. And so you think he was sickly, the land would be sickly. It was kind of like an accepted principle in a lot of like medieval European organizations. Anyway, so I'm kind of playing around with that. Like a lot of the magical creatures are, if not for being in Jubal County, if they're somewhere else, they'd be much more pleasant to be around.
So I like that he reflects I like that he reflects like the whole, I guess, like almost emotional, physical state of that county, because it's kind of gone off the rails from what you've mentioned. That is actually a really cool creature to bring in there. I can't wait to get to that part. Yeah. So
most of what I use are creatures from myth and legend. But I do occasionally create some, but mostly it's Celtic mythology with slight dabbles into other mythologies on occasion. So
that makes it fun. I have to say, because like a lot of people will go mainstream, like these are the creatures I'm going to use kind of thing, and don't like to bring in different like others. So because I'm like that in my writing, I want to bring in like subtle different beings, like the Kushtaka that I bring in my first book, Black Flames. So, but it's so much more fun when you do that. So do you have more scattered throughout the series of creatures? Yes. Tell me more.
No, actually the scene I'm currently writing involves so kind of how the idea behind how is the family lines, like ethnicities bring spirits with them. So if an area is so where I'm from, there's a very large Scots Irish immigrant community. Like McGough, there's tons of people whose family are Scotch Irish. And so that's why a lot of the creatures are Celtic, because this part of Jubal County, a lot of the families there are Scots Irish, and they've kind of brought their mythos with them. But no one place is totally homogenous. So there are Scandinavian families that have over the 150 years, and so there's a creature called I'm going to mispronounce it. which is a water spirit from Scandinavia that lures people into the water to drown them. So that is the scene I'm currently writing, involves one of them. So
Sweet.
and then some creatures I did a creature flicker dog. That is, it's originally he was going to be a grim, which is like a black dog, a grim. But what he is he just kind of flickers in and out of existence, like as he's going along. It's think of like a film shuttering kind of deal. It's just a large kind of like Irish wolfhound sized dog, supernatural dog that in and out of existence as it runs along. And so that's kind of the villain of one of the novellas. So
flickering dogs, that's awesome, as my dogs are trying to bark in the background here. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
What is your least favorite thing about Howard Marsh?
So I wrote, I chose to write about a character that's a drug addict. I don't use drugs and have never actually. Bizarrely, I'm the only person in my friend group that has never done drugs. And so I made him a drug addict because it was something I kind of wanted to bring kind of a light to. There are tons of people that are heavily addicted to drugs, and everyone just kind of writes them off. And so I've got a couple of friends and know of people that are very much like Marsh, that they're not going to get a happy ending. The drugs will inevitably kill them. And so this is kind of my chance to write a happy ending for some of the people like that. And so I don't act about drug use. It is very much what fuels him as a character, and it's how he literally fuels his magic. But the whole point of the series is to get him off drugs and get where he's not using drugs, like actually learning how to do magic instead of using drugs to compensate. So that part it's like not something I'm totally familiar with. And it's so I agree that giving it a good representation. But I also I don't want this to be a user's manual on drug use. So most drug use actually happens off screen. It'll make a reference to, oh, I did drugs, not, oh, watch this scene of me doing drugs. So I guess that's probably my least favorite part.
Yeah, but you do really at him trying to I feel like there's this undercurrent of he's trying to get away from it and better himself, but with any addiction, there's a struggle. But with Howard Marsh, I feel like you have kind of like this undercurrent of him actually wanting to get better and not do the drugs. But like with any addiction, it's extremely, extremely hard to break it, especially with as long as he's been on it. Like you've kind of made it seem in the story. But I like that about his character, that you're kind of like, hey, this is a bad thing, and like hinting at things to come that are better, so to speak.
Yeah. It's so I actually I have a Patreon, and on it I write little essays that it's stuff that or any of the books, but it's like just kind of like Howard Marsh's thoughts on different things. And it's stuff that might kind of add some added understanding, but it's also kind of his thoughts on stuff. And one of the things he talks about, this is something I've read. I'm not the authoritative source on this, but something that I read was basically heroin users, back it was made illegal, typically after a certain would, but when it was made illegal, far fewer people got clean, and it took far longer to get clean because drug addiction is typically as a coping mechanism for some sort of stressor. And if you make what they're doing illegal, to jail, they are going to court. It's adding, they're relying on their crutch more for them to kick the subject. And that's like, I know people, they're just caught up in a cycle of going to jail. You know, they're not bad people. They just do drugs. And they just keep going to jail. And then they're caught up of, well, they've got court fees. Well, they don't have a job because no one will hire them, and repeatedly arrested for drugs. And so then they get warrants put out and licenses revoked because they have, you know, not paid their court fines. And it's more drugs. And for far too many of them, that's it. It's a downward spiral until death. So it's something that he's very passionate about, and something I'm very passionate about as well. So I'll climb down off my soapbox now.
No, you're good, because I get that. I mean, growing up in a rural area, you see a lot of that affect the people around you. Sometimes you don't realize it until it's almost too late. So like, I'm glad that you're kind of like highlighting that, because and it needs to be highlighted because maybe it can bring help to them.
And that's why, like, at the back of every book, I put a thing there where it, like, hey, if you'd like to get help, here are resources to get help, kind of deal. I don't expect it to get a lot of use, but you know, it's there. You know, hopefully someone sees it and gets some use out of it at some point.
Well, we have reached the end of our time. So go ahead and tell our viewers and listeners where they can find you and your amazing book series.
Yeah. So anything you want to know about me, tellsbybob.com. It's got everything. I do everything from podcasts to indie game design to writing novels to small nonprofit. This is book one. Ooh. You can get them in print, ebook, or they are in Kindle Unlimited on Amazon. Just search Bob McGough, and you'll find them.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being on Character Driven.
Thanks for having me. I had a blast. So you love my son. It's always a lot of fun for me, and probably no one else around me.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. And remember, it's always time to go indie now.
Mouthing a few words and flicking my fingers, I summoned up a ball of blue flame in the palm of my hand. It didn't do the best job lighting my way, but it was better than nothing. Wheeling around, I caught a glimpse of reflected light coming from a set of eyes near chest level to me. Hunched on the side of the pine was a squirrel, its rat-like body clinging to the bark, its tail flicking back and forth angrily. Beady little eyes stared at me, and before I could react, the damn thing launched itself through the air at me. Its little teeth had hit my hand, leaving a tiny gash I could feel, but the squirrel had gotten the worst outcome. It was dazed, stunned by the force of my blow. I screamed as something latched onto my calf. Kicking out wildly, I slung another squirrel skyward as it shook loose. I took a small chunk of flesh with it as it hurled through the air. It stopped when it hit a nearby tree. I managed to hang onto the bark somehow, turning and chittering at me wildly. The one I had dazed was starting to try and chew into my now, which made me jump back. I could see that there were at least several fucking their way down a tree towards me, their beady little eyes all filled with blue flame and mayhem. I have a soft spot for small woodland animals. Fuck those squirrels. The closest caught an orb of blue flame to the face as I turned and took off running. Before, I'd been jogging, but now spaced me, damn squirrels. I called up another orb, feeling it burn through more up my care-corded drug-fueled power. Turning a squirrel into a tiny bonfire was one thing, but doing the same thing to a forest worth of squirrels? Well, I'd need a lot more drugs. And it suddenly occurred to me that I had left my box of Oblivion in the van beneath the seat. A A quick glance behind me showed the squirrel BQ was sputtering out. The tiny rodent had not provided much fuel for the magical flames.